I want to give a special shout out to some members of our ministry team. As has been intimated in the chat and Megan earlier on, we arrived today to discover that we didn't have any internet stuff, so we had to reset up a new studio in the space of what seemingly is only minutes. And I want to give a shout out to our team for changing their plans and being flexible for what seems like the 100th time over this past 18 months. And I'm sure that you appreciate what they've done every bit as much as what I do. Today we're going to be looking at Isaiah chapter 58, but before we do that, I want to share something that's on my heart. A couple of weeks ago in the middle of the night, I was in that half sleeping, half awake, not sure if I'm dreaming kind of state. I'm sure that you've been in there. And for some reason in my head, I just kept having this image of turtles running through my head. Later on that day, I was watching the TV and they had this very short clip on the news from the London Zoo, how they were measuring the annual growth of the Galapagos tortoise. You know, those tortoises that are, they're massive type things. And I suppose over that day or two, I just had that image, turtles and tortoises flooding my brain. And I don't know about you, but when I have something like that, it seems like my brain literally chews over that again and again. I understand, I wasn't chewing on turtles themselves, I was chewing over the idea of turtles. You and I know about turtles, don't we? In times of danger, their natural instinct is for self-preservation. Danger comes and that long neck with the tiny head withdraws under the hard shell. For each one of us, we live in what seems like dangerous times. Not physical threat so much here in Australia, but threat to our emotional, our social, our employment, all sorts of different parts of us. And our temptation is to be like a turtle and withdraw, to self-protect. I have to admit there are days when I feel like turtling under the doona, as I'm sure you do. I want to urge you to go against this instinct. The church is a community of love for God and love for each other. And at this difficult time, we need to remind ourselves and live that truth out every day that we can. To keep on looking out for each other, to see those who are hurting, those who are in need of support and care, and to maintain that sense of connection. These feelings in recent days have only been further accentuated by kind of this divide that's growing between those who have a vax and those who don't, for those who can't for medical reasons or for personal choice. And now we know what's coming, don't we? We've seen it in New South Wales already as they've enacted their roadmap for the future, where there's going to be kind of this passport sort of idea where some can and some can't. I would be naive to believe that that's not going to be enacted in Victoria. I can't speak to the specifics of that situation at the moment because we don't have any details, but I know that there are many people who are not getting vaccinated, who already feel like pariahs and, as someone described to me the other day, as lepers because of this situation. It only leads to more division and more disconnection. I want to remind you today that we are all one family under God. We are all one family united in Jesus. The good news of Jesus is for everyone. Doesn't matter where you come from, your station in life, it is for everyone. And I want to remind us of that because I want to say as a church that we want to be a place that has love for everyone, where all feel safe to come, where all feel that they belong and are invited to be a part of. You know, this week on Thursday, as Megan mentioned earlier on, was Are You OK Day? A great initiative encouraging people to check in with one another. And can I continue to implore you to check in with others? Will you join me with this? Will you participate? At the time of physical separation, it's very difficult for us as pastors to maintain contact with seemingly almost anybody, it feels like at times. We need to know who is hurting, whether that's hurting emotionally, hurting spiritually, hurting financially, for some with struggles with families or with employment, can you please communicate with us? We'd love to know. But not only that, I'm also urging you to act, urging you to participate in this. You see, as a church, we need to bind together to support one another, and for that we need people to be participants, not spectators. At our church, we have a kind of what we call a telecare program, where we have a number of people who regularly call those who are hurting, for those who have been sick or in difficult situations. At the moment, we have a need for some extra people in that space. If you want to be a part of that, would you let me know? To do so, you just simply need to go into our website, and you can do a volunteer thing, or go in through the app and say that I want to volunteer. We would love to hear from you, because we need extra hands on deck. I want to say to you at this time that it's important that we not turtle, that we not just withdraw and go into a protective shell, but that we participate in a community of love. Thanks for hearing this message, and I trust that you'll be able to participate in it as well. If you've got a Bible, it would be great if you turn now to Isaiah chapter 58 as we read through it.
Isaiah chapter 58. True fasting.
Shout it aloud. Do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet.
Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the descendants of Jacob their sins.
For day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways.
As if they were a nation that does what is right, and has not forsaken the commands of its gods.
They ask me for just decisions and seem eager for God to come near them.
Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it?
Why have we humbled ourselves, and you have not noticed?
Yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please and exploit all your workers.
Your fasting ends in quarrelling and strife, and in striking each other with wicked fists.
You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high.
Is this the kind of fast I've chosen? Only a day for a people to humble themselves?
Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed, and for lying on sackcloth and ashes?
Is that what you call a fast? A day acceptable to the Lord?
Is not the kind of fasting I have chosen to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke?
To set the oppressed free and break every yoke?
Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter?
When you see the naked, to clothe him, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood.
Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear.
Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard.
Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, Here am I.
If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk,
And if you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed,
Then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday.
The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame.
you will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail.
Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations.
You'll be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings.
If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath, and from doing as you please on my holy day,
if you call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's holy day honorable,
And if you honour it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speaking idle words,
Then you will find joy in the Lord.
And I will cause you to ride on the heights of the land,
and to feast in the inheritance of your father Jacob.
for the mouth of the Lord has spoken.
here ends the reading.
Thank you for all who shared in that. The Roy Morgan Image of Profession Survey for the year was published in April. You may have read it or seen it in the news. Journalists are always quick to grab at a highlight. So bankers plummeted in their standings during the Financial Royal Commission. Politicians are always decimated when there's another shenanigans that have gone on in Parliament House. In recent times, through the COVID-19 pandemic, has seen the rise of trusted professions like nurses and doctors and pharmacists. Like many people, when I read this particular survey, I have a tendency to scan for my own profession. I look at the top. Where are ministers of religion to be found? Well, it's not there. Next, of course, I look at the bottom. Whew, that's inhabited by car salesmen, real estate agents, politicians and media professionals who are like social media influencers. Whew, not there either. No, ministers of religion are kind of somewhere in the middle. They're bracketed by accountants, public servants and lawyers. Well, not the end of the world, but then once you start to read a little bit more, kind of feels like it is. You see, when you delve into the numbers, you see that ministers are rated by only 30% of people, 3 out of 10, as having very high or even high ethics and honesty. Gotta say, that's dreadful. Dig a little deeper and it's even worse. You see, it's 30% with a bullet, and that bullet is not heading up, that bullet is heading down. The survey noted that when it was first introduced in 1996, ministers of religion were rated very high or high for ethics and honesty by 59% of respondents, enough for 6th place overall. But in 2021, have hit a new record low of only 30% for ethics and honesty, down 4% from 4 years ago. It went on to summarise in this way. It said that the considerable scandals experienced this century have clearly had a significant impact on the standing of the profession in the wider community and religious observance that has been steadily declining for years. The considerable scandals experienced this century have clearly had an impact. Now, I don't look at surveys like this for approval. I do not do what I do for the approval of society, but I would be incredibly naive if I did not think or reflect on why only 30% of people would rate us as being honest or having high ethics. In fact, if we're convinced of our desire and our vision to make followers of Jesus, this ought to hit us flush between the eyes. A further ABC survey expressed in more details way again the poor esteem in which religious leaders are held. When they're trusted, people goes for doctors and nurses and pharmacists. They're all rated in the high 90%. But religious leaders in this were distrusted by a further 70%, and 35% of people, that's more than 1 in 3 people, said they didn't even trust them at all. Well, why is this relevant? Well, it's correct, I've got to say, that some people will always, in a sense, hate the church and the message that it delivers. Why? Well, because part of the message, not of the church, but the message of God, is to convict us of sin. And if someone says that we are a sinner, our natural response is kind of to arch back and say, not me, that's that person over there, not me. Because when someone says that, well, it pokes at my pride and my fear. That's to be expected, that people will rebel against that idea. In some ways, it's a good thing, because it means that the church's message is being heard. The problem is when our society is angry at the church for the wrong reasons, not the right reasons. The problem is when our society is angry at the church for the wrong reasons, not the right reasons. And why are they angry now? I think you know. I think I know. For the wrong reasons. You know, in that passage that was read to us today from Isaiah chapter 58, we read of anger again burning towards God's people. As we delve into it quickly, we realise that the symptoms, the reasons for it are similar to this anger of today. The difference is in Isaiah chapter 58, the anger comes from God, not from the general population. Here's the announcement: shout, trumpet blast, don't be timid, Tell my people of their sins. This is an announcement pronounced from the top of the hill saying something is going wrong. What is it? In Isaiah chapter 58 verse 2 it says, you act so pious. You act so pious. You're hypocrites, that's what it's saying. Is there a quicker way to lose trust than hypocrisy? They come to the temple every day and seem delighted to learn all about me. They act like a religious nation that would never abound in the laws of its God. They ask me to take action on their behalf, pretending they want to be near me. We have fasted before you. Do you hear what the announcement's about? You come to the temple, the equivalent of a church building. You learn about me. You've listened to the latest sermon on a podcast. You act pious like you are the pillars of morality in society. You pray, you fast. It's like a game of religious bingo. They've filled out all the squares. And yet it meant nothing. The truth, in fact, is that their behaviour was not nothing, it was less than nothing. Because it didn't cause indifference but anger. Lives filled with empty ritualism. I mean, what does a little abstinence matter if I'm pretending to fast when, you know what, I can keep on my own lifestyle of disobedient behaviour and rebellion against the true morality of God? Offer sacrifices that pretend to bring us to God, but yet in my daily life turn my back on God and walk away. It wasn't the activity so much that was the problem. And fasting, for example, is a physical expression that a request before God so causes an individual to be concerned about their spiritual condition that we want to remove all the physical necessities, remove them from that experience so that I can focus only on God. It's designed as a process to bring about purification and humbling before God. It's not an end in itself, but really to focus on what is important. The problem was not with the activity, the problem was in the motivation underneath it. You see, it was done with a hypocritical spirit, with what superficially seemed like an eager devotion was instead aimed at earning the individual benefit. That might seem kind of strange to us now in 2021, but back in that ancient Jewish culture, it would be the equivalent of kind of wearing the right clothes, attending church services regularly, saying the right things and using the right language when you prayed, helping yourself to look good in front of others, or maybe even a little bit to delude yourself as to what was really going on in your life. In verse 3 they say, why aren't you impressed? Why aren't you impressed, God? We've been very hard on ourselves and you don't even notice it. I will tell you why. It's because you are fasting to please yourselves. Even while you fast, you keep oppressing your workers. What good is fasting when you keep on fighting and quarrelling? This kind of fasting will never get you anywhere with me. You see, God is less impressed with hypocrisy than even our society. Their religious performance was poisoned by the motivation that was within them. Not only that, their motivation flowed out into life. They kept oppressing their workers. You know, part of fasting would make it difficult to do your job, to be productive in that space. But don't worry, if you're the boss, I'll do my pretend fast, but I'll exploit my workers and make them keep the tills turning over. Not only that, in the midst of my fast, I'll engage in all sorts of quarrels and squabbles with my family. I suppose in some ways it's understandable, isn't it? If you've got a basically unspiritual person forced to spend time being hungry, well, it's going to lead to some sort of disaster. This is the claim. This is the pronouncement against these people. You are hypocrites. You are hypocrites. The contrast, of course, is what sort of lifestyle resonates with God. Read along with me. From verse 6 it says, "No, this is the kind of fasting I want. Free those who are wrongly imprisoned." Oh, wait a sec. It doesn't actually talk anything here about not eating. It doesn't talk anything here about those kind of religious performances. No, it goes a different way. Free those who are wrongly imprisoned. Lighten the burden of those who work for you. Let the oppressed go free. Remove the chains that bind people. Share your food with the hungry. Give shelter to the homeless. Give clothes to those who need them. And do not hide from your relatives who need your help. You hear what it says? Treat your employees with justice. Share your food in your home. Free the oppressed. Remove the chains that bind, whether they're physical or emotional. And it's not even just talking about free those chains just once. It's also talking about engage in breaking down the systemic barriers and binds that entrap people and snare them. You see, religious action does not impress God. But love expressed through action does. Love expressed through action is true faith. You see, it's incredibly difficult for the actions that are spoken about here in these verses to be selfishly driven. If you're engaged with treating your employees with justice, sharing your food and your home, freeing the oppressed, sheltering those who are homeless, that's not for your own benefit. That's to serve others. You see, true love and true charity or true grace is a gift that expects nothing in return. Hypocrisy seeks itself, but true faith manifests itself as serving. And then what happens? Well, we're left with this incredibly beautiful picture. Then your salvation will come like the dawn, and your wounds will quickly heal. Your godliness will lead you forward, and the glory of the Lord will protect you from behind. Then when you call, the Lord will answer, "Yes, I am here." He will quickly reply. Then your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be as bright as noon. The Lord will guide you continually, giving you water when you are dry, restoring your strength. You will be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. Some of you will rebuild the deserted city, the ruins of the cities. Then you'll be known as a rebuilder of walls and a restorer of homes. Isn't that a beautiful picture? Your salvation will come like the dawn. Wounds will be healed. Godliness will lead you forward. God will answer. This is not earning someone's salvation, but being gifted by acknowledging our need for God and then living that out. You see, true faith lives in God's will and His purposes. And God's will is a life of love. Concern for our humanity, our brothers and sisters in this world, is not an isolated episode, but a way of life for God's people. Because it is the way of love. This is true faith. And when we focus on what the mission of God is during this month, the mission of God is to partner with God in loving this world. It has two kind of expressions of itself. Firstly, we might say that we want to see people become followers of Jesus. That's what's spoken about in the Great Commission, to make followers of Jesus. We emphasize it in our own mission statement. In Matthew 28, it talks that Jesus commissions His disciples, His followers, to make followers by baptizing and teaching them so that they might obey. This is about a changed life for now and for eternity. But the other part of the mission of God is partnering with God in the renewal of all things, bringing about His kingdom in this world. The rule of God, which has characteristics like righteousness and peace and justice. This is about a changed life for right now. This is good news for now. This is faith that makes a difference in lives right now. You know, the church has an image problem. It's not just ministers of religion. Did you know that 9 out of 10 regular church attenders believe the church has a positive impact in the local area? Well, that's great, isn't it? But that's 9 out of 10 regular church attenders. What do you think the number is for people who aren't church attenders? In fact, it's just 1 out of 6 who do not go to church believe the church has a positive impact in its local area. Now, we don't need to hire a PR spokesperson or marketing company. No, we simply need to live out our faith as God's people. To live out our vision of sharing God's love through actions and words with this world. If you read the history of the Christian church throughout the centuries, you will quickly discover that the greatest impact that the church has ever had is not when the church is exercising power, not when the church is exercising influence, not when the church desires to stand up for itself and have a loud voice. No, the greatest times is when the church has been a faithful instrument of God's love, when it's humbly exercised a ministry of service. It's ironic that when the church does not seek to command the public pulpit is when it is heard. Let me ask you today, what sort of church do you want to be a part of? I know I want to be a part of a church where the love of God is not only experienced personally, but lived out each day. At Croydon Hills Baptist Church, we have a desire here to make a difference in Maroondah and beyond. And we do this by living out the mission of God, making followers of Jesus and partnering with God in the renewal of all things. You know, you hear me say regularly, I want us to be known for what we stand for, not what we stand against. And when I say stand for, what I mean is what we do. We stand for the lived out reality of love for our world, love for our community, love for our neighbours. We stand for healing and reconciliation and justice. Now I want to say to you today, I invite you to join me in this journey, to leave behind the false, superficial, hypocritical religious practices and to live out a life of love. Love for our world, love for our community, love for our neighbours. And then the words of Isaiah 58 will ring true. Then your salvation will come like the dawn, and your wounds will quickly heal. Your godliness will lead you forward, and the glory of the Lord will protect you from behind. Then your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be as bright as noon. The Lord will guide you continually, giving you water when you are dry, restoring your strength. You will be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. I invite you to be a part of that church. Join us, please. Amen.